Sorry, I'm recording now. So I've got this H1 tag with select state from drop-down menu, and I Googled how to get this specific drop-down menu with cars and like options. So see what that looks like. So I've got this select state from drop-down menu, Saab, Volvo, Mercedes. Okay. And now I want to actually render all the values of that state stuff, all the state abbreviations. Let's get rid of that logo. So I can import the state data from, I can see state data. I think that's it. So it says on line 3, state data is not defined. I'm going to console log state data. All right, and go back to my app, and I can see my state data being consoled in the, or being printed out in the console. So here it is, the name, Alabama, great. So here's my actual selected items, but I don't want any of this stuff. I just want a bunch of options. So I could, copy all this down and manually hard code all the states, but that's very manual and not very efficient. So what I'm going to do is write a function called display dropdown, const display dropdown, that literally just returns a bunch of these options with the value being, which is it, the Alabama or something like that. The value being the alpha 2 and the display name being the name. So I'm going to split the screen. All right. So I can do let state objects or state state info equals an empty array. And now I can loop through or map through that array map. I'm going to grab the data and the index value of that, and I'm going to console log the data. And instead of these options, I'm going to do inline JavaScript and execute that display dropdown function. Display dropdown. Display dropdown. So when this runs, it's going to come in here, grab the state data that I'm importing, map through it, and grab the value at that index, or grab the data at that specific index, as well as have the index. I'm just kind of console log that value. So if I refresh, you can kind of see it here. Name, Alaska. So this is kind of what I want. Now, I can state info dot push. I need to actually push in this option tag. So push in that option tag and return state info. So let's kind of see what that looks like. 933. Oh, let's actually return state info. So right here it says expect to return a value in an arrow function. Let's look at what this looks like. All right.
You still need to return from your display dropdown function as well.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Return state info. All right. So now I get Volvo 51 times, but I don't want Volvo. I want data dot, is it alpha 2? Alpha 2. And instead of Volvo, I want to do data dot name. Let's look over here. So here we go. We're able to render all the states. But it says here, warning, each child in a list should have a unique key property. Check the render method of app, see blah, 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 blah. So when I'm rendering a bunch of values, each value has to have its own unique key value. So that's why I included that index in the map. Say index. There we go. Now that warning should have gone away. Kansas? That's not right. Kansas. Does anybody have any questions about what I just did and how to display some data? So I've got the select tag. In between the select tag, I'm rendering a bunch of option tags by executing the display dropdown function. It takes an empty array, declares an empty array, maps through the state data, grabs the data at that specific index, as well as just the index. I'm returning the state info, and I'm pushing an option tag into each one of those states into the state info array. Then I'm finally returning that array, and it's being rendered down in the screen.
It's displaying the long name, but the value is equal to the 2-letter name.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
So, yep, the value is the alpha, the abbreviation, the state abbreviation, and then the actual display name is the actual name of the state. All right. So when I click on a state, I want the abbreviation to show up here underneath it. So I'm going to use state to handle that part. So I'm going to use the use state hook. And I'm going to set the initial value, or I'm going to say, what is it? Selected state, then set selected state. And be structuring that from the use state. And the initial value is, let's say it's null. There is no value. So in the select thing, the select tag, I can have an on change event handler, handle change. So I've got this function, and now I can actually write a const handle change that takes in an event, and then console log, just see the event.value or event.target.value. So the value is coming from the value of the option tag. If I refresh, Kansas, so KS shows up, great. But now I want to set the state value, so the selected state value, set selected state to event.target.value. So again, here I can console log the selected state initially. I delete that console log. Refresh. There it is, Florida. All right. Now, if I come to here, it says select drop menu that contains a list of US states, which we just did, and then a component that displays the abbreviation of the selected US state once you select a state from the dropdown. So I need to create another component. Let's come into here. Inside my source, let's create my components. Let's call it state, and then just state JS. Why not? I don't know if that's going to mess up anything, just because. RCS. Do you want me to make this a functional based component or a class based component? I'll make it a functional based component, actually. Just kind of show you how props is passed down. So I'm doing React stateless component, RCS. Then in here, I'm going to just say H1 here, just to see if this actually displays in the abbreviation or in this app.js. So I could import state from components, state. And then in my app.js, I'm going to call state. So my app.js is loaded, it mounts, comes down here, returns this JSX, displays this H1 tag, the select dropdown, and then it also renders my state component. So my state component comes over here, executes this, which returns a div that has an H1 tag of here. If I did everything correctly, it should show up here. So right here. So there's my here. Does anybody have any questions of how I imported and displayed the state component?
So there in app.js on the left, like I guess an app is certainly going to reference multiple components. It's just the component that on the right, the individual x.js's, that are only going to be one component per.
Not necessarily. Like this one could have another component, like render, like another component.
Oh, another.
Like it could, in theory.
Okay.
So that's where we get like the tree, like app is the parent of state, and then state would be the parent of some other component. Yeah.
All right, so you can embed components in other components.
Yes. That's where kind of the data flow can get kind of icky. So I've got the state down here and it's displaying right here, some state. So now I want to pass the selected state, so the state of app.js or this app.js down to the child component of state. I don't like I'm going to change this. There's too many states. Abbreviated state. I'm just going to stand by, sorry. Yeah, that works. Whoop. And then down here, abbreviated state, just to keep, I don't know, I keep saying the word state. So let's see if it still works. Cool. So I want to pass down the state of app.js down to the abbreviated states state. So I can pass things down, data that is passed down from a parent to the child component is known as props. And I can pass props to the abbreviated state by just typing stuff in here, like in line with this. So some data equals some state data. So like I can do that. And now in order to access that, I need to, in the abbreviated state, the child component, it needs to accept a parameter or accept an argument, which is called props. It's a designated keyword. So if I say props like that, I can console log props, and the props data that should come down should be some data. So if I look at refresh, if I refresh, right here it says some data, some state data. So I'm passing that down, and it's passed down as an object. So if I know how to pass data down from the parent component down to the child component, I can actually pass down the selected state data. So I can say selected state equals inline selected state. So now, if I refresh, it says the selected state is initially null. Let's come down here and do props.selected state. So nothing's showing up right now because null, there's nothing showing up. But now if I change it, Georgia shows up, Minnesota shows up, Mississippi, Ohio. Does anybody have any questions about how data could be passed down from the parent component down to its child? So I'm literally passing the state of the app.js down as props to its child component. I'm calling it selected state equals selected state. I'm just keeping the naming the same. I can call this anything. And then I can do props.anything, and it would still work like that. But just keep naming as your app grows. You'll want to keep naming the same. And now I can kind of optimize this a little more. Instead of passing in props, because props is an object, I can literally just destructure it here, const, do curly brackets, selected state equals props. So it extracts the selected state value from the props object. And now I can get rid of that keyword, props. So this assigns the value selected, or extracts that key from the props object. And now it should still work the same. You can optimize that more by, instead of passing in props, you can destructure it up here. By doing the curly braces, extracting the selected state from props and just passing in that value into the abbreviated state, and it should still work. But it just depends on how you want to do it.
There's multiple variables. I know it's getting passed in as an object. So would you I want to say in Python, I know you can kind of unpack them all, sort of, put the comma separated. Would it have to do it one line at a time, or?
Nope, you can kind of do like, so I'm passing in more. So this is kind of how I like to separate it. So in this abbreviated state component, I'm passing in selected state and some other thing called more variables. That's a string called something else. Then if I go back to the abbreviated state, I can grab selected state and say more variables. And now I have access to that more variables, but if we just wanted to pass in props, you can deconstruct it by doing const equals props. Now I can access more variables here as well. So like that.